what do you think we can do when in the face of pseudoscience, Melanie? Like,
I mean,
what options do I have?
yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends on who you are. You have a platform that a lot of people don't have, and so I appreciate you using your platform for what it is that you're using it.
Thank you so
My
much.
my approach is always just education, and one of the things that I do with education is something called inoculation theory. Imagine how a vaccine would introduce a small amount of a germ to your body so that your body builds antibodies to it. So that when you're faced with that germ, the virus, the bacterium, or whatever it is in real life, that your body has the antibodies ready to go and is like, I got this.
Right.
Psychological inoculation involves something similar, except with misinformation. So if it's misinformation that can hijack your brain and that can go viral and spread from person to person, what we can do with psychological inoculation is expose your mind to a bit of misinformation so that in the real world, it is you then develop antibodies so that when you're faced with that misinformation in the real world, you're able to fight it off. Now, there's different kinds of inoculation. So there's passive inoculation, which is when you just explain it to someone, versus active inoculation, which is I'm a huge fan of as an educator. You have people create misinformation.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So I'll come back to that in a second. There's fact-based inoculation, which is the facts of why something is wrong, which is a lot of what it seems that you do. Like, here's the facts of why you're wrong, and here's the facts that counteract that. Versus techniques. So the techniques are the things like the techniques of science denial or the techniques of pseudoscience, where either explaining passively or getting people to make the techniques of pseudoscience or science denial is gets them to be inoculated against those. I use a lot of a combination of active and technique based. So let me explain. Science denial, the techniques of science denial are summarized often by the acronym FLICK.
Okay.
So fake accounts, logical fallacies, impossible expectations, cherry picking, and conspiracy theories. So with those techniques, so for example, if I was a maybe flat earther, I might say, well, here's this expert who says that, and it's not a real expert, right? I'm probably going to argue illogically, like straw man the science position, or I'm going to attack scientists who think flat Earth is, who think the Earth is round, is like shills for something.
Appealing to common sense is the other super common one for them. The Earth feels stationary and looks flat.
Look out and see the flat Earth.
Yeah, it looks flat and feels stationary, therefore it is. So I get the default position, is what they'll claim, or they'll say, or they'll do exactly what you do. They'll appeal to emotion. You're not special if the Earth isn't flat. They'll give the they do the argument from incredulity all the time. So they'll say, you really believe that you're on a ball spinning 20,000 miles an hour in a circle, hurling 30,000 miles an hour around the sun, which is hurling 200 million miles an hour through space. Da 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 da. Hang on. Pause. No motion is absolute. Relative motion, my friend. Slow down. Yes. So fallacy arguments, check.
Okay, check. Impossible expectations. Well, if you can't prove to me 100% that the
Check.
Earth is round, then I'm not going to believe you.
Check.
Okay, check. Cherry picking. Well, I look out my window and it looks pretty flat to me. Or this one experiment showed this. Or yes.
I'll do you one better. How about reading the old Michelson-Morley experiment that tests for the ether, that finds that the ether is not real, and then coming to the conclusion that the ether is real? How about taking a quote from Einstein, the founder of the theory of relativity, in a context where Einstein knows that the Earth is round, and cherry picking a part of it where he says, I had become convinced no terrestrial experiment can prove the motion of the Earth, though the Earth revolves around the sun. In a book he wrote for like home use, as opposed to his actual like academic papers, where he very much shows two different ways. He detailed before that quote 2 ways we can know that the earth moves around the sun. One of them being parallax motion. Very easy to demonstrate. Hold your finger in front of your hand like this. Doesn't it split in two? If you go from eye to eye, you see it move left and right. Because when you look at things out in space, the earth does that as it's on either side of the sun. It's a very easy demonstration to make, right? Very easy visual demonstration. That's one of them. So Einstein proposed 2 different models. That's one of them, for how we know that the earth goes around the sun. But then because later in a book, he was talking about how things are all relative to one another. And he's kind of talking about how if you are only ever on the earth, like an observer on the earth, there may be no terrestrial experiment. Which also can't necessarily be the case because Einstein knew about Foucault's pendulum, which is the other observation that shows that the earth moves. You can, in fact, use Foucault's pendulum or build a giant pendulum in your basement that tells you your latitude and longitude on the earth. So there's your cherry pick. Cherry picking Einstein, one small quote he made out of his entire body of work.
Yeah, and interestingly, part of cherry picking is quote mining.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anecdotes. Yes. So, and then the last C is conspiracy theories. And so the original flick, by the way, is Mark Hoofnagel, but John Cook has organized it into the flick taxonomy and built a game alongside it. So back to that in a second.
Yes.
But the C with the conspiracy theories. So I'm amongst those like Stephen Novella who think that underlying all science denial, like the key aspect of all science denial and pseudoscience is conspiracy theories, and that none of them are maintainable without a conspiracy. How else can you explain why all the world's experts disagree, except that they're conspiring? And so the bigger the claim, the bigger the conspiracy needs to grow over time, but it has to involve a conspiracy. So so that's science denial. Now and back to inoculation theory. So John Cook, have you ever heard there's a 97% consensus on climate change? You ever heard that data?
I think so, yeah.
That's his study. It just turned 10 years old this year, actually. And there's a great website called Skeptical Science, which is the best website on climate change online for the average person. It's just flipping fantastic. But anyway, he made this game called Cranky Uncle. And what's awesome is that everyone knows who Cranky Uncle is without having to explain it. Like Cranky Uncle is the dude at Thanksgiving that you really don't want to hang out with because Cranky Uncle is just flipping cranky and he's like the guy that you have to talk to. Cranky Uncle is a climate change denier. And in the game, you learn the techniques that Cranky Uncle is using to deny climate change science and piss him off as you level up and learn more of his techniques. It's brilliant. The game has new versions. So right now it's sub-Saharan Africa and parts of Asia on vaccine denial. So they're working with UNICEF on vaccine denial. But the point is all science denial, all of it involves flick. And the brilliant part about inoculation is that those are techniques. Once you can see the technique of cherry picking or impossible expectations or conspiratorial thinking or fake experts, once you can see that in one context, you can see it in others. So teaching this, for example, if you were to play the game and learn the techniques of science denial when it comes to climate change, you could apply those to flat Earth. Right? You'd see them because they're literally the same. In order to deny science, you have to use all of those same techniques. Pseudoscience, I view as like sort of the mirror image of science denial. So whereas science denial does not want to accept a conclusion, so its standard of evidence is impossibly high. Pseudoscience wants to believe, so its standard of evidence is low for what it doesn't want.
For what it wants, yeah.
So it often feeds on itself. Like I use the example of, if I don't want to accept evolution science because I think that means that I'm a godless heathen, then I'm going to use flick to deny evolution science, but I have to replace it with something. So I replace it with the pseudoscience of creationism or intelligent design or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's often like a psychological need to uh, replace a belief that we don't want to accept. With pseudoscience, so pseudoscience, because it doesn't want to believe, its standard of evidence is low. It still uses conspiracy theories. Like, so for example, if I think that big pharma is hiding a cure for cancer because it wants to make money, right? So, in order to believe that, I have to think all the doctors are conspiring, and all of the government agencies are conspiring, and all of industry is conspiring, and not just in the United States, but in almost all.
Everywhere in the world.
So, like, doctors in Germany are hiding the cure for cancer from Germans because they want American pharmaceutical companies to be able to make money off of our healthcare system.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make any sense.
No.
Um, but often those come from various psychological places, like people are wanting to believe or not wanting to believe. With inoculation, then, what we can do is we can teach people the techniques of science denial. We can teach people the techniques of pseudoscience. And my personal favorite is to have them create it. So when in my classes, for example, I have students. So I teach students to make conspiracy theories.
Nice.
Okay, so like I start with here's my birds aren't real.
Yeah, birds aren't real. I love
I'm a
it.
pure truther, right?
Yep.
Like nobody actually believes in that. It's funny.
So
Nobody's set by it because it's just flippin' funny.
yeah.
So with my students, I introduce birds aren't real, and I explain the characteristics of conspiracy theory. So conspiratorial thinking involves everyone is in on it some way. They want to do something bad for some various reason, and in the meantime, all evidence confirms their theory.
Okay.
Any evidence that doesn't support the theory, you find a way to discount it. Any evidence it's planted or it's covered up or whatever it is.
Right. Every
So,
picture from space is CGI.
there you go. Okay, so here's what I would do with flat earthers if I was trying to inoculate against this kind of belief. I would say, okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to make a conspiracy theory. I want you to tell me who did what and why. Come up with something really crazy. So, like, the hot dog bun and hot dog manufacturers are conspiring against us by putting wrong numbers in each of the packages so that we have to keep buying them.
Yeah.
Right. So there's my conspiracy.
Yeah.
Who did what? Right. Now I need to make a convincing narrative. Like I need to find a way to make the argument so I convince you of its truth. And I need to find evidence. So this is where I need to go online and I need to find anything that confirms my narrative. And this is so funny because at some point my students, I put them in groups to do this and they're like, Professor, do I need to use reliable sources?
No.
I mean, I really appreciate you wanting to use reliable sources in a science class, but this is where you want to find a subreddit or a YouTube video or whatever it is. Find something, I don't care what it is, that confirms your narrative. Okay, so now you've got your evidence and your narrative. Now I'm going to put you with another group. And your job is to convince. So if I'm on one group, I need to convince you of why the hot dog bun and hot dog manufacturers are conspiring. And your job is to convince me why I'm wrong, right? Try to convince me of why my narrative is wrong. And I need to find excuses. This is the brilliance of conspiracy theories, why they always withstand attempts at disproof. There's always an excuse for why your evidence is wrong. Right. So in this back and forth exchange, I need to find all the excuses I can to counteract you. So in the process, look, who really cares about like bird truthers or about like hot dog buns? But the point is, we have learned what a conspiracy theory looks like, how they're maintained. They're immune to evidence, and so you can see it in real life and not fall for it. I use it with science denial. So Cranky Uncle is a great example. I use it with, there's another great game you might be interested in. I think it's called Bad News. It's Sander van der Linden. And it is a great game that shows so you are in the position of you need to build a news empire. And
does it use social media? Do you like build a social media, like get a bunch of followers by putting out
It is.
misinformation.
You don't actually go on social media. It's all within the game. But yeah,
Right.
you need to get social media followers. You need to can like
I've
so
played this. I played that one.
you need to piss people off and like appeal to conspiracies and like
Yeah.
troll people.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
I've
So
played that. It's really good.
yeah,
I want to
it's
put. Well, let's collect the links for those so we can put them in the description for the viewers so that they can see them. We'll link all of this stuff down below. But yeah.
brilliant. Another one. I teach my students how to create advertisements for health pseudoscience products.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, okay, you need to put an ad on TikTok for some. You make it up. Like, actually, so I'm a science. This is college, right? I can do that.
It's fine.
Okay, so like, so either a fat burning pill, a muscle building pill, or something that enhances male.
Male activity and stimulation.
So students really like to make like manly pills where they one of my favorites was hammer and like displeasing women in bed, you just need this pill and like it's huge and oh it's amazing.
It's
The
so
point is all of these ads, they appeal to nature, they appeal to tradition, they appeal to the masses, they appeal to authorities, they use anecdotal evidence. They get your 1 month free trial. You won't be disappointed with the results, and put this out on social media to show everybody how great your results have been. All of that is intended to get you to buy a pseudoscience product. So by getting my students to create them, they see them in real life, right? I teach them how to cold read, like psychics.
Oh yeah, I love that one. I do that with my students too. I do a live cold read. I go. I'm sensing somebody with the letter S. Do you have a family member with that? Because that's like the most common letter, right? And like with the letter S in their name. Do you have anyone? And then we do. I've talked about that one on stream before, I think too. But I love that one. I love teaching cold reading. And the other one I do is this. Can't see it because I keep it down here. I bought this my niece, but I didn't give it to her. So she's super into tarot, and I used to know how to do Celtic cross readings. I used to do them
Okay.
for my friends. Because when I say I used to be steeped in pseudoscience, it wasn't just yak. I believed in Reiki healing. I believed in tarot cards. I believed in astrology. I believed in I believed that one time my friends and I were walking around in the dark, and we were teenagers, and we wanted to cut through a cemetery, and I sat cross-legged in front of the cemetery to give us a protective barrier, walk through the spirits, so we weren't bothering the spirits in the cemetery. I used to do all that stuff.
Did you, when you came out of young earth creationism, did you come out of all of these at the same time?
Pretty much. It didn't take very long. Yeah.
And also, is that a game?
It is. No, it's a real tarot card set. It's not a game. This is a real tarot card set that I own. And it has little descriptions on the bottom of each card for what each card does, plus a book, and the book details what all the cards do. Okay. And when I get to unfalsifiability, when we talk about falsifiability in my sessions, when we get to that in your articles, I do a tarot reading for them, and I say, or I make them do it. I say, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do a tarot reading for me. So I'm going to take 5 cards at random. Okay, this card is my past. This is what it is, and this is what it means. This card is my present. This is what it is. This is what it means. This card is my future. This is what it is. This is what it means. This card is my ally. This is who is going to help me achieve that future. The good parts, or who's going to help me through that future if it's bad. So if it's good, it's who's going to help me, and if it's bad, it's who's going to help me through it. And this is my enemy. We're going to play him upside down. He's going to cause the bad that happens to me, which is a very standard Celtic cross reading. Now, Celtic cross usually contains 4 more cards that represent other things, and you lay those along the side. I know how to do this, right? It's awesome. So what I do is I show these cards to the student, and I go, read my fortune. Tell me what this means. And then they'll build the narrative out of it. I'll say, all you have to do is connect the narrative of these cards. This is where I came from. This is who I am now. This is where I'm going. This is who's helping me. This is who's hurting me. And when they finish building that narrative, I say, now, why were you able to do that? And when they start to think, oh, well, I don't know, it seemed like they all connected together. Isn't that really interesting? And I said, do you know why? Because the cards are intentionally vague. Like all astrology, like all tarot, like all horoscopes, the cards are intentionally vague, such that they can apply in numerous aspects. Did you notice that I said my ally helps me get to a good situation or helps me through a bad situation? Whichever it was, that ally can be an ally. So you could fit them in the narrative wherever you need it. That's just one example. Past, present, and future are entirely disconnected phenomena or periods of my life. But by presenting them as three separate events, you can fill in the blank between each one to connect them together. They don't necessarily come. And so I can pull any 5 cards at random out of this and generate the story of your life in any way. And if I'm having a conversation with you about it, and I'm asking you questions and you're giving me information, or I see that you're wearing a wedding ring or anything like that, I can use information that you present on your own body, things that you tell me to help construct that narrative, because it's intentionally vague. And then what I do is we go look up horoscopes. So I have them look up 10 different horoscopes from 10 different websites, all different websites. And I say, let's do an experiment. Is there one common narrative across 10 horoscopes? Because if astrology is objectively true, they should be able to look at the position of the stars and tell me, based on my sign, what's going to happen today. So we're going to look at the exact same sign across 10. On 10 websites, I should see at least 3, maybe 5, to get a consensus that say the same thing, or anything that's similar. And by the end of that exercise, we find not a one. I think one time I found 2 that said something a little bit samey, and we kind of put them in the same category. I said, again, because it's intentionally vague, right? Let's try pulling a random horoscope. Can you tell me what sign this is? If I have someone who believes in horoscopes, because I've had them, students who believe in. What I'll do is I'll say, oh, can I just put that to the test really quick? Let me find 3 random horoscopes, and I just want to try this a couple of times. Can you tell me what star sign this is? And they can't do it. They can't do it any time. And if they think that I'm pulling from a bad source, I'll say, oh, I'm sorry, where do you get your horoscope from? Let's use them. And then I do it again with them. So I keep this stuff on my desk because those are so easy to slam dunk down.
You might be talking me into tarot cards. So what I do the first day of class is it turns out I can lie well to my students. I didn't actually know that I could do that, but
so good.
I tell them, like, okay, so I have a friend and she's an astrologer. She's actually really good at what she does. Apparently, she's been on TV and written books and such. And she knows I teach this class on skepticism. And so she's agreed to provide readings, personality readings for students if they're interested. So if you're interested, here's the information she asked you to fill out. And it's like a sheet where I've asked them, just a blurb about astrology and numerology, and then what's your name and birth date. And then, like, if your house was on fire, you could take one thing, what would it be? If you could do one thing for a living and get paid for it, what would it be? And if you could have one superpower, what would it be? Right. So I'm priming them with these basic questions, right? So the next time I see them, then I say, I've got the readings. Now, remember, our goal here is we want to test how accurate she is. So I need you to read these as quietly as you can and not let anyone know what you think of them. When you're done, we're going to rate her accuracy on a scale of 1 to 5. And so they do that, and you can see them like, right? Okay, don't tell me, right? Okay, now close your eyes. On a scale of 1 to 5, how accurate? And I've been doing this for a long time, 5-7 years, something like that. And they'll generally say like 4.3 to 4.5 out of 5. I did not make this up. This came from Bertram Forer in I think it was the 50s. He was a psychologist. So, okay, now, wow, most of you thought she was really accurate. If you feel comfortable, please get with the person next to you and talk about the reading. Like, why was it? What about it really spoke to you? And they start talking, and it's a page-long reading, and sometimes it takes them a while because what they're doing is they're picking out things that really spoke to them, but they're forgetting the other things.
Right. Selective.
Yeah. And so then let's say it takes them 6-8 minutes, then they realize they all get the same one, right? So okay, did I lie to you? Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Will I promise not to do it again? No, I don't think
we have a good conversation about dihydrogen monoxide coming up.
Yeah. So, like, look, this is a class about skepticism. I don't want you to believe me just because I said it, right? I want you to be skeptical. Um, but why did you believe it, right? So now let's talk about this, right? Let's
Yeah.
talk about Barnum statements. And let's talk about confirmation bias and priming and appeal to authority and so on. I've just written a paper with John Cook, and we propose this as a type of inoculation called experiential inoculation, meaning we inoculated students against this by fooling them. We literally fooled them to show them they could be fooled. But this way, hopefully they won't fall for it again. But the whole point is, like, I start with this. I used to think how dangerous this is, and it still is pretty dangerous to fool students, to lie to them on day one. But look, if I went in and I said to students, I can fool you, they'd be like, yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
okay. And then they're going to be instantly skeptical. They won't believe anything you say.
Nobody thinks they can be fooled. Nobody
Right.
likes to be fooled. But by fooling them, I've demonstrated to them, I've proven to them, I can fool you,
Yeah.
right? You can be fooled. My goal in this class is to show you, to empower you, to not let anyone fool you, right? I didn't take your money. This was for educational purposes. Um, but you have to recognize how easily you are fooled by your own biases if you want somebody to not fool you.
Mm-hmm.
The inoculation thing, I think, is really powerful in that, whether it's getting students to think like a science denier or think like a pseudoscientist or, pretend to cold read, all of those are ways to learn the techniques that people fool them with.
Yeah.
Right. And that's all happening without, so back to cranky uncle. The science of climate change is pretty complicated. Evolution is pretty complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I was engaging with a denier over the intricacies, like the nuances of something like climate change, sometimes we'd miss the forest for the trees, right? I can teach students the techniques that people use to convince them that the science isn't real without having to explain to them the intricacies of the science. So, for example, one of the most common things is, okay, so I'm in Boston right now, and it's mid-May, and it's pretty chilly outside. It's rainy and chilly. So I could say, well, it's cold. See, there's no climate change, right? That is really commonly used. It seems like a slam dunk, right? But that's an anecdote, and our experiences are limited. And so if I said to students, okay, Stephen Colbert said, I just ate. There's no global hunger, right? That's funny. It's a parallel argument that immediately gets them to understand why that argument is illogical. And I don't have to go into like, well, the global temperature is raising by this, but this means regional variations by blah, blah, blah. And each regional variation can vary. I don't have to do that. One might again, miss the forest for the trees.
Right.
Because then the assumption is like we have to understand all of this science to be able to refute the denialist position. And I don't think that's the case. But more importantly, especially, so you asked the question earlier about like, is it worth talking to a science denier? If they're in your life, if they're someone that is close to you, if they're someone that you have a connection with, then absolutely they're worth having these conversations with. We need to have them more. We need to have them in a respectful way.
Yes.
A way that connects with people and shows them that you actually care, like the underlying values are the same. And that, so I always phrase with my class, like, so there's this great quote, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your decisions, and the quality of your decisions is determined by the quality of your thinking. The whole point is that I'm trying to get people, like, thinking is power. Knowledge is great. There's just too much to know. So we need to be able to think better. And part of thinking better means being aware of of our own pitfalls in our minds and how we can lead ourselves astray. And so if our goal is to understand something better, then having the conversations with people this way, like that demonstrates that models the kinds of attitudes towards epistemology of knowing, of how we come to know something, that connects with people, and that has a chance of changing people's minds much more so than like a comment section on like Facebook or Twitter.
Yes.
Which is really hard to do.
Yeah. My kind of philosophy on it is like I said earlier, if one person reads that comment, like goes to that page, sees that thing and would have liked it and sees my comment and just thinks about what I had to say, then I think that's mostly worth it. There's a follower in our community now who follows me because of one of those comments. I didn't really necessarily turn him from a position, but he saw me, arguing about something, and we kind of, high-fived it a little bit in the comments, and I was like, hey, you welcome on down, and he started following my page, and now he's a part of the community. He shows up for live streams, and that's what I want to do is the worth that I feel, and I agree with you that it doesn't do a lot of, I don't know if ostensible is the word that I want to use, but like outward apparently good, because I know I'm not convincing anyone on that page. I know that, right? I understand that, but I think there are young minds that do see those, and I think that it gets them to think, and I think that it shows people who see that content and are enraged by it enough to go comment in a harsh way, that there is a critically thinking voice that can speak intellectually against it. Not just mine, but many others. And I think that it shows them they're not alone. There's a place for them. There are people who stick up for them. Especially in my community, sticking up for marginalized groups like trans people. Super important to me. You want to talk about the people who get the most unnecessary amount of hate in the world right now? I don't understand.
Yeah, I just I have to say, the information landscape is incredibly polluted.
Yes.
And that some of that is a deliberate strategy to confuse us, to just go, I don't know what to believe. And I just won't even believe I can know anything, or just trust the person who says what my tribe believes. Right. So being a part of that information space and being a voice for reason is really valuable. I would also say, like the clip that you sent me, how I met you, where you showed me where you had used Floater to talk to, was it a moon landing denier?
It was a guy whose buddy was. Ath's buddy was a moon landing denier, and he had said, I don't know how to refute these arguments that he's giving me, and they're very convincing. But you're an educator. Can you help me? And then while I was talking to Ath, he was telling his buddy what I was telling him. And then his buddy was replying. And then eventually his buddy found out that I was streaming it live. And he was watching the stream, commenting on it. So Ath shared his Discord with me. I was watching his buddy's, comments, and I was able to kind of talk to him in real time. But that conversation was not about his buddy. That conversation was for Ath, because he was an impressionable young mind that came to me with the question. He was on the fence. He did great critical thinking. He said, I want the dissenting opinion from what my friends said. And then I was able to give that to him and demonstrate him and walk him through how we think about these using your model. It's invaluably helpful. And walk him through how to think about things in a structured and reasonable way.
I don't remember exactly how that ended, but in my mind, the way I'm remembering it now is something to the effect of, you've really made me think. And I just remember thinking that was a win, and that was amazing. So kudos to you for what it is that you do.
I will give myself a very tiny pat on the back for helping Ath.
If I could do it for you.
Oh, thank you. That's awesome. That's awesome. I super appreciate it. Like, and I know that I'm not, I don't want to be boastful. I'm not anything huge. I'm not signed as well. I haven't been on like these major debate channels or anything yet, but I hope to, provide a space. And if dissenting voices want to come debate, they can. Like my Discord handle says, debate me, bro. Like, come on and bring it on, because in the marketplace of ideas, if I'm wrong, you'll be able to show me that. And I know I'm not. So let's go. Let's go. And I can say that confidently, because I put in the effort, put in the work, think about what I know and why I know it. One of my favorite things to do that I feel is very rhetorically effective is when I see a post that is just egregiously wrong, and I comment, I say, well, actually, it's not correct. This is really how we differentiate or distinguish these things. Here's for example, here's the sex, gender expression, tri-spectrum kind of, model of how we do things, right? Of kind of what we're learning. And it's new, but this is kind of what the evidence is showing. This is kind of an old, outdated belief about how people express themselves. Come on, buddy. And, it's okay. And And then they'll say, well, you're just a shill, you're wrong, I'm a pedophile, I'm a groomer, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this and that. And I'll say, oh, okay, so I'm wrong. Let me see if I can fill up an entire Facebook comment limit, the character limit, with citations. Paste, 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 paste. And I'll paste it all the way down.
There's a limit?
Yes, yeah, and I've reached it on more than one occasion. Because I'll just post, I'll go, here's a citation, this is the study, here's the link to it, this is their conclusion, da-da-da-da-da, here's the citation, here's where their conclusion, da-da-da-da-da, these guys are arguing for this, and I'll just say, like, here's everything that I said, so that you understand, and usually I'll do this depending on how condescending they are. If they're very condescending about it and want to call me a file in a group, I'm just going to make sure to point out exactly how wrong you are.
Is that really? Do people really say that?
Yes.
Like I've heard those arguments almost in jest. Like that's the kinds of arguments people would make if they were that like hateful and stupid. But I didn't.
Yes.
Realize they were actually making those arguments.
It's very much the same as when like gay marriage was being debated, and it was like, if you stick up for homosexuals, you're a degenerate. You're here for degeneracy. You're ruining the modern American family.
People marrying their dogs, or.
Well, and that was the thing that was said, right? If homosexuality is okay and there is no line, they would give the slippery slope fallacy. Well, then, what else is okay? Is it okay to be able to do these things with those who are unable to consent, or with animals, or whatever? And then today, the idea is that if you are, the major argument that I see from all of the pages, and I don't go to like. I just go to the ones that pop up in my feed, and I comment, and hey, this is not necessarily correct. And what they'll do is they'll come back and they'll say, well, you're the only reason that you would want to affirm a trans identity is to confuse a child, to fit your narrative or your agenda. You want to destroy gender because you hate traditional family, or you're a groomer. Which is unfounded, right? And there's not even any backup for that. It's just the idea is that people who are gender affirming are groomers. People who want to allow gender affirming care to children, which does not mean surgery. It's a massive straw man. Are groomers and or pedos. I get called that on a daily basis, almost a daily basis for sticking up for trans people. Yeah.
What social platform is this on?
Facebook.
Okay. We can talk about Facebook if you like, but
sure.
I had no idea that was like legit a thing. Oh, who's the baby?
This one is mine. This is River.
What's his name?
River is her name. She's that sweetie.
Oh, River is so sweet.
She's so pretty.
Yeah, I mean, like any conversation about an issue that's this complex, we need nuance.
Yes.
And we need the best understanding that we currently have. And I, based on the current evidence, and we need more science.
Yes.
My plea is that we need more science, but we also need like a good faith attempt to understand the science and to why we're having these discussions to begin with, which is human rights.
Right.
And that kind of stuff is just totally disheartening. If I might just tell my Facebook story for a second, because Facebook, and I feel like more people need to understand what happens to science communicators on something like Facebook.
Of course.
So my Facebook channel must be just over 3 years old, something like that. And for probably almost half of that, I've been in various forms of jail to the point of being having my site being removed from the platform. Mm-hmm. And it's my initial infraction was because it was around the time of the big lie, and I was quoting what's often attributed to Goebbels, which is one of the Nazi propaganda ministers. He's attributed with this quote.
Did you say Goebbels? Or yeah.
So he, the umlaut, Goebbels.
Goebbels, yeah.
And Facebook flagged me for promoting hate speech in dangerous individuals.
Oh, because you're trying to say this is what fascist propaganda looks like, and they're saying, hey, you're sharing.
everyone at the time was quoting him to show the harm of the big lie. And actually, at the time, so shortly afterwards, Facebook set up like what they called the Supreme Court or something like that, where they had experts from outside Facebook look at various cases that they had ruled on. And they took 5 cases, and one of them was very similar to mine. And they actually overturned 4 of the 5 cases, and one of the ones they overturned was like mine. Nevertheless, Facebook doesn't give
Right.
about
The algorithm is emotionless. Yeah.
So then moving forward, I have been flagged for like so I shared a graph from the journal Nature of mass extinctions over time. I shared a photo from Smithsonian about potato diversity in the Andes. But the most recent one that got me in serious trouble, 2 recent ones. One was I talked about conspiracy theories and about Wakefield's fraudulent study that seemed to
Andrew Wakefield.
Well, I got flagged for that. And then over Halloween, there was this image that was circulating, and it was of, they called it Halloweeners. So it looked like a package of like Oscar Mayer Wiener hot dogs, except the hot dogs were black, and it said Halloweeners on it. And it was supposed to be black licorice flavored hot dogs.
Okay.
I was like, that doesn't look right. And I saw like nutritionists and scientists sharing it and talking about Americans' diet. And I don't disagree with that, but I was like, I'm not quite sure this is true. So on my website, one of the articles that I have is about how to fact check. And it has a graphic on how to fact check, right? And lateral searching and that kind of thing. So I used it as an opportunity to teach people how to fact check. I said, well, this has been circulating. Here is how you fact check. Here's my graphic. Let's walk through the steps. You laterally search. You immediately get to Snopes, and Snopes says this is an altered image. Great. So I shared it. Like 2 weeks later, that image had been circulating on Facebook for like 3 weeks. They flagged me for sharing a manipulated image. They put me in jail for sharing misinformation and reduced the spread of my posts. So all of that is to say, I know this is not just me. I am connected with a lot of admins for other science websites on Facebook. It is so bad that Facebook's algorithm can't tell the difference between misinformation and debunking misinformation, that a lot of us self-censor. Like to this point, I don't talk about climate change. I don't talk about vaccines. I don't talk about GMOs. I don't bring that up because I know that there is a very strong chance that Facebook is going to put me in jail and reduce my reach to do anything.
That sucks.
Yeah.
That's so dumb. That's so dumb. Because thankfully I haven't seen that yet, but my page is very small. I'm not large like yours, so maybe I'll get there, because I've talked about Wakefield's study before. H Bomber Guy actually has a really good breakdown of Wakefield's study on his you're gonna be like, I got like 20 YouTube channels to go sub to now.
Yes, I can't share it. I won't share it.
Yeah.
Because like literally I was sharing that just to show that his study was fraudulent,
and they still flagged you. That's so dumb. I hate that. I don't get it. Okay,
well anyway, I just wanted to bitch for a second.
That's fine. And I think that's part of a greater, like, that's a good snip of a greater conversation we can have about like false reporting posts and cancel culture and things like that, which we here at Gaming with Everyone don't support cancel culture, in case anyone out there is curious. Okay, I think cancel culture is stupid. Cancel me. There you go. At me, bro.
Are you trying to get me canceled?
No, I'm trying to get me canceled. What are you talking? No, I'm just playing. we already said trans people, and we're already canceled. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah, I've used all kinds of trigger words during this conversation.
I know, right?
Oh crap, they're all gonna cancel me.
Yeah, that's it. Well, that's why I said, like, this video's already demonetized. It's okay. I'm not. This is purely for educational purposes. Neither is benefit. I think it's sad that good information gets lost in the crossfire sometimes of debunking bad information. And that's one of the reasons why, like, for me personally, I don't particularly care for the censoring of bad information in some contexts. Like, for example, I really like what YouTube does. If you talk about the flat earth in a YouTube video, they put the Wikipedia page for flat earth on your video, you know? They say the flat Earth is a debunked model of the Earth, da 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 da, like the Wikipedia page on it. I think that's fine. Give people the facts on the post, or put a thing on it, a disclaimer, and says, this post may or may not contain misinformation. Would you like to view posts like these? Cover it, whatever. Let people choose whether or not to engage with it.
Because I think in the olden days, the algorithm would just sort of keep playing and playing and playing. I remember reports of, so parents were saying that their kids were watching videos for like geology or physics class, and if you left it on long enough, it would just start going into flat Earth videos.
Well, I don't know exactly because I can't speak to those specific experiences. YouTube shows you what you want to see, so it very much depends on what the user engages with on a regular basis, right? I watch a lot of flat Earth debunkers, so if I'm watching Fight the Flat Earth while I'm working or whatever, listening to it, and I just let it play to the next video, it's going to play more debunkers, or it's going to play a modern day debate, or it's going to play Tune, or whatever. I like a lot of those kind of podcasty shows, and they sort of play into each other, but it very much is dependent on your recommendation. And there definitely are. YouTube is a lot better now about sort of deprioritizing misinformation in their algorithm. So if your video is pro flat Earth, they will deprioritize you in a way. And we know this because flat Earthers constantly about how they're being censored, even though their videos are allowed to be on the platform.
I think that might be the change, because I think previously they were more.
They would just play. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's whatever was getting more views, and flat Earth content gets a lot of views.
Yes. And I'm kind of chuckling because YouTube has learned me, and I like cat videos and reaction videos.
Lol. Yeah. It knows me very well. I get a steady diet of Age of Empires 2, science debunking, debate or two, and then a couple of other video game related things. I used to watch a lot of game design series and stuff. It's very funny. And to write us back in a little bit, I think inoculation is awesome. I try to do this a lot too. I also fool my students ahead of time. I get them with the dihydrogen monoxide website. Gets them every time. Nobody ever sees it coming. I've convinced almost every single young mind I've ever engaged with to ban water. It's my favorite thing in the world to do to people. And I just sneak it into a lecture. So what I do is I can show you how I do it. What I do is we start with, and we're going to transition. Wow.
I have some other great examples for you if you're interested.
I am super interested.
Have you heard of the Pacific tree octopus?
Oh.
What?
I'm in love. Hang on. Wait. Let me share this. Window here. Yes. Okay. And wow, we're back. Okay. So what I like to do is I love this series by Dr. Hunnes on Critical Thinking Project. Awesome. Dude's awesome. Love his stuff. This series is really cool. It's a series of 7 lectures.
Have you ever given him a shout out on here?
Sure, I've brought him before, but I can't remember.
If you want me to, I can certainly do it. Keep going. Yep.
Yeah, awesome. Dr. Hunnes is awesome. I love this. So cool. His TikTok videos are awesome too. Go follow him. He's Pet Earthling on TikTok, everyone. And what we do is he has this lecture on what is natural. And so by that point, we've talked about controlled studies and why they're important, why they're better than anecdotal evidence. And we've talked about what counts as scientific evidence and why you should believe the consensus instead of the fringe. Okay. So I've already given my students 2 massive lectures that affirm that I'm telling them the truth. Here are good ways to think. And then I hit them with this: what's natural? And he starts with this question: do you think we should ban dihydrogen monoxide? And it's used in household detergents and soda. It's fatal if it's inhaled. When heated, it's known to cause blistering burns. It's a primary chemical in acid rain. And I stop at this slide. And what I do is I say, now, what should we do when we think critically? Find an outside source. So here's my outside source. This is dhmo.org. And I pull them to this. And then we go to this FAQ, and we just read our way down. Read and read and read and read and read. All of this, right? So I do all this with them. We finish all of this. And so they've already got some trust in me by this point as an authority. And they just soak up every single thing that I say in here. because we were already 2 lectures in. And then I give them those few things, and I've couched it as, now we're going to think critically. Let's go find a source that agrees that, let's go find another source, see if there's something else that corroborates this. And so many of the things that are listed here are in here. So I'm like, see, we found corroborating evidence. So, and by the end of this, I go, now, should we ban dihydrogen monoxide? And they unilaterally, they say yes. Almost unilaterally. And then by the end, I click back over to this and I go, now, do you know what dihydrogen monoxide is? Now that you want to ban it, do you know what it is? And they're like, no. And I go, okay, well, this is how we write this in chemistry. Di means 2. So we're going to say 2 hydrogen. Oh, okay, so it's hydrogen. So 2 hydrogen. Mono, that means 1, so we don't need a subscript. Oxide, oh, that's oxygen. So dihydrogen monoxide. And then I click over to this screen. And they're like, you mother effer. They get so mad. They get so mad. They're like, oh, you had me going. So funny, man. So funny.
Actually, I'm going to share my screen here so that you see. If you've never seen, you really should.
Deadly fact. Oh, I love it. By burning rocket fuel. That's so good.
I use this as cherry picking.
That's a good example.
Light water is the leading cause of drowning.
It is.
Everyone exposed to water will die.
Will die. I love that. 100% of mass shooting cases did the shooter consume water beforehand.
Yes. Actually, yeah. Okay. So, you should know about Pacific tree octopus. Mike the Headless Chicken.
Trees. Okay. From Zapato Productions, Intradimensional. Help save the endangered Pacific tree octopus from extinction. Oh, hell yeah. Okay. Oh, this looks exactly like the HMO. That's so funny.
Yeah, a little bit. But when I teach this stuff, I definitely want to fool them, but I want to also bring in things that they might think aren't true, but that actually are.
Uh-huh.
Right. So that my goal is to get them to be skeptical and then check. Right. So some of the things might actually be true. So Mike the Headless Chicken is actually real.
Really? That's awesome.
Mike the Headless Chicken is awesome.
Mike the Headless Chicken.
Great moon hoax. When I teach information literacy, it's a great, so it's from the 19th century, like mid-19th century, and it was this wonderful, from the Sun, which was a newspaper at the time, and they built this like world that like every week they would explain, this scientist got a telescope and he was looking at the moon and he found like all of these creatures living on it, and the whole thing was a hoax.
Oh, so, my God.
It's brilliant. Yeah, fooling students, definitely a good thing. But then, so the point is to get them to be skeptical, right?
Yes.
And then, like on their exam, so they just had their exam. What was the true thing I had them check? So they've already had their exam. It's all good. I can say this. Oh, I know. There was a parrot that learned how to use Alexa to order treats.
No way. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yes. So I totally use that story.
I'm blown away. So funny.
I think we have different corners of the internet, and I'm so curious about yours. So I'm giving you little bits of mine here.
That's so cool. No, that's awesome. We definitely do. That's so cool. I think that's correct. I think that inoculating is pretty good. By exposing or having students construct them on their own. I think those are good lessons for other educators.
So one of the things that I do that's actually gotten a lot of attention, and it's being used in other classes, which I think is wonderful. So after I have my students play cranky uncle, I've taught them logical fallacies, right? And so what I want them to be able to do is to understand how arguments can be illogical and how they can be misled by illogical arguments. And here's the problem. Logical fallacies are really hard to understand. There's like a trillion of them, and each one of them goes by a bunch of different names. Yeah. And each has several sub fallacies, and there's a lot of overlap between them and so on.
That's why I like Hudson says fallacies. He very neatly compacts them. It's very nice.
So I use like 10 to 20 like key logical fallacies, but let's say there's like a dozen. After I've taught them logical fallacies, I have them, okay. So pretend it's the end of the semester and you're failing because you didn't do the work, right? You legit deserve to fail. You need to write the professor an email to argue for why you should pass the class using fallacies from class,
That's so
right?
good.
So they write this email, they put it on a discussion forum. They have to tell me what fallacies they used. And then they have to read other students' emails and find the fallacies they used in those. So, like, students well, you just hate students and you're too short to teach us anything. And one of my favorites, oh, they always appeal to emotion. So lots of grandmas die and dogs.
Yep.
They will say, "Oh, if I fail this class, then I'm going to get kicked out of my house, and I'm going to be living on the street. I'm going to be homeless, and I won't be able to get a doctorate, and then people are going to die because
It's
you didn't pass."
the slippery slope.
And why do you care about my grade anyway? There's like literally homeless people. There's homeless people. Like if you actually care, homeless.
So,
I mean, it's just brilliant stuff.
that's
But
so good.
they learn how fallacies work by using them to argue,
Yeah,
creating the misinformation, and it's fun, it's not triggering, it's humorous. Yeah.
that's so fun. I love that. I love that. It's really cool because there are so many good ways to put that. To be able to like present those lessons in ways that like it doesn't have to be challenging your belief. Challenging your belief comes after the class,
Yes,
right?
later in the class, much later.
Yeah, it is not. Well, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It is for me. I always say like it's not my place to change your mind. That's for you to do later if you want. It's my place to make sure that you got there for a good reason. And if I've done my job well, you'll come to good beliefs. That's what matters. One of the things that is a super pet peeve to me is watching pseudoscientists use debunker arguments or logical fallacy arguments in like super egregious ways to debunk like the consensus position. It's like you have already left the realm of science by being the fringe, first of all, but second of all, oh my god. And the worst one for me that I hope everybody realizes is the difference between appealing to authority, actual appeals to authority, and correct appeals to expertise, because there is a correct way to appeal to expertise and there is a faulty way to appeal to authority. Both of them are references to an authority on something, but the question is whether they were actually an expert in the field. And you talked about this in the beginning when you said, I would consider even a doctorate of chemistry a false authority when it comes to dinosaur bones. And then that's correct. My teenage mind had a very difficult time discerning her from an expert in, archaeology, paleontology. And that was super difficult for me because we tend to kind of lump experts together. It's so dumb. When debaters like flat earth debaters and stuff will go on and they'll open with, long spiels about here are all the fallacies that you're.
Yeah.
And there are sort of pre-budding or almost in what you were talking, inoculating their audience against the arguments that you're going to see. These are all the fallacies you're going to see, and then they get them wrong. And then the debate, and then what they'll do is, and I just want to make sure people understand this is a tactic that's used, a rhetorical tactic. You disagree with you. Usually what will happen is what they'll do is they'll open with, well, these arguments are all logical fallacies. And then when you try to get them on it, nail them on it, you don't actually understand the fallacy. What they'll do is they'll just change the topic. I thought we were here to talk about the earth being flat. Why are we talking about philosophy? Right? Just don't make the bad arguments. We won't have to talk about them the rest of the debate. And that shifts all the onus. My question is, do you think that there's a good strategy for dealing with that? In terms of like having a conversation or discussion with somebody if they try to pre-butt by misusing a fallacy. What do you do when someone misuses it? Because my solution is just to call them out on it and not move on from the conversation until that's addressed. I don't know if that's effective or not.
That's a really hard thing because I think it's probably dependent on situations. And I personally would be really hesitant to do that one-on-one debate with someone who's just intent to deny science. Now, that
Yeah.
said, if they are coming in, so it's called pre-bunking. Inoculation can happen either before or after misinformation. And doing it before actually does seem to have better benefits than after. But propagandists and deniers can also pre-bunk by using the same strategies to convince you of something that's not true. And it sounds like that's what you're talking about. So they would come in and are they giving like incorrect definitions of fallacies?
So usually like in the case of the appeal to authority, they'll say, if you just quote a scientist on this, that's an appeal to authority. You're just making an appeal to authority fallacy. If you appeal to the scientific consensus, that's a bandwagon fallacy. If you say that the position of the stars in the sky show the shape of the earth, that's affirming the consequent. Can't look at the ceiling to find the shape of the floor. And all of those are wrong, right? That's not actually what those fallacies mean. Appeal to authority is because someone is an authority, they're correct, even if they are not an expert in this field. You appeal to experts in their specific fields over even other well-respected educators, right?
Yeah.
Like this whole conversation, I would defer to you on pretty much anything. You're a biologist, so like, and I'm not. So if it comes to a biological thing, you're like, I don't know that's correct. Unless I have another collection of well-respected biologists, it would be very difficult for me to position, right? I would have to appeal to all of those experts on that topic.
I mean, the appeal to authority fallacy is pretty tricky because an authority and an expert are not the same thing. So science has experts, not authorities. But when an expert gives their opinion, it shouldn't be this is right because of who I am. It is this is my position based on the evidence.
Right.
And backing up a bit to how the process of science works, science is not about any individual. The science is effective because of its community aspect, because it is a community of experts who are all trying to collect and evaluate evidence and refute each other's positions. So it's like a collective disproof kind of um, um, their competition towards then whatever claim survives that and becomes a consensus position is the one that is most likely to be true. Now, in science denial, what we find is so back to what is his name? It was a Republican strategist, Frank Luntz. Yeah, I think it was Frank Luntz, who is a Republican pollster and a good one who did a lot of like, especially around George W. Bush, a lot of like framing of issues. So it's not the estate tax, it's the death tax, right?
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
That kind of framing. What he found through his polling was that consensus, what we now know as a gateway belief. In that, if people are exposed to the idea that the vast majority of experts in a field hold a certain position, they're most likely to accept it. Which is why something like climate change denial started with there's doubt, to there is no consensus, to well, science doesn't work by consensus, right? So it's a constant moving of the goalpost because there is an inherent awareness amongst those who are pushing disinformation that recognizing a consensus of experts does actually mean things to people.
Mhm.
So, what I would probably do is help people understand the difference between experts and authorities and the value of scientific expertise. And if I just might tell a little story here to help somebody understand this. So my background is plant ecology. And I'm in the northeastern part of the United States. I'm originally from the Midwest. I'm now in the Northeast. And every single year at this time of year, people start posting about poison ivy.
Okay.
Okay. Poison ivy, obviously, if you react to urushiol, if you're allergic to it, you're going to get the hives and so on. So it's important for people to be able to recognize it. But you then see these posts, and then someone will say you have to also be aware of poison ivy and poison hemlock. Okay. Now, poison oak does not grow this far north.
Okay.
It doesn't live up here. Poison hemlock is only found in wetlands. And the vast majority of people are not like traipsing through wetlands. Okay. So you'll get these people who are posting about how they got poison oak or poison hemlock, right? And they'll say, I got poison oak. Well, how do you know you got poison oak? Well, I went to the doctor and the doctor said you got poison oak. Now, urushiol is the same compound in poison oak and poison ivy.
Oh.
Right? So to the doctor, the medical doctor, it's the same allergic reaction.
Right.
They're not a plant biologist. They have no idea, probably, that poison oak does not grow up here. So here I am trying to explain, actually, I'm a plant biologist, and here, this is the range maps from USDA, blah, blah, blah. People won't believe me because their doctor told them that it was right. So it is important to note in any particular situation who has the most expertise in an, and then listen to their arguments on that. Now, if they disagree with a consensus for some reason, then that is obviously important for you to note. But at its most basic level, who is the expert here?
Right.
Yeah.
Whose expertise do we defer to? And I agree. And because that's a good distinction to make. Just because someone is authority does not mean they are an expert. Just because someone is an expert does not mean they're a position of authority. So appealing
everything. It is a very narrow area. With
yes.
Someone, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed. I think, and it's important that there is expertise. So then there's another one that there's another one which it brings up all the time, and other flat earthers bring. They call it a credentials fallacy. They say, my argument must be wrong because I don't have credentials. And say, well, that's a credentials fallacy, right? And while technically true, I guess, sure, just because you don't have credentials doesn't necessarily make the argument wrong. There was a rebuttal that was given to him by a YouTuber, PhD Tony, we debated, who's a seismologist. And he was using seismology to show that the Earth is round. It was awesome. Crushed him. I kicked Austin around the room for like 2 hours. A great debate. Loved it. My favorite part about that debate, just to throw a little bit of tea, Austin started that debate with, I gotta go, I can't stay for Q&A, I'm out of here. Went on to Toon's channel, and PhD Tony went on MC Toon's channel for a live stream for an after show. Which it showed up that after show. He was there for like 2.5 hours. Yeah, you really had to go, buddy. Okay. Anyway, we'll tea. Get some flat earthers salty. So PhD Tony pointed out to him that the issue with the credentials fallacy is whether or not it's accurate. If there is no expertise on an issue, then it does not discern real information from any mad ramblings, right? You have to have some way to denote some level of expertise in a topic, however that is, experience, academic level. You either have academic credentials or you have achievements, or the two criterion that PhD Tony gave. He was like, that's what he presented. And so he said, you don't have academic credentials with it, which is fine if you have achievements. Where are your achievements? Where's your Nobel Prize for debunking the Earth being round? Come on, buddy, bring it on. Where's your published papers? Where's the papers you put out? What have you written? What have you made that's not a YouTube video? Have you invented any technologies? Have you made novel testable nothing? And then he basically slammed him by saying, you've done nothing of value. Nothing that your position puts out is valuable. So, yes, it is wrong of me to say that if you have some achievement. And we're talking about Bill Nye, who does not actually have I think he has an honorary doctorate, a group of educators.
Engineer,
but right? He's an engineer, right? And so he's not. So, you're talking about, is Bill Nye an appropriate expert to debate on the topic of creationism? I would say that Bill Nye has lots of achievement under his belt. He has TV shows. He has all of this work that he's put into learning. And for the same reason I do the job I do. I put in the work to learn, to memorize the exam questions I had to study, to be able to teach the material, to find the materials that I have, to pull up those textbooks. Hey, not hard to get on OpenStax and pull out a chapter of a book and read it, let's go. But But even in his case, sure, he doesn't have credentials, but he has achievement. We can look at the things he's done and show that. And that gives him a de facto, I would say, level of expertise in some things. But if somebody who was a PhD, and ran experiments and did studies in a particular thing disagreed with Bill Nye, I'm like, I don't know, Nye, I think he got you. Like, there has to be a way to delineate expertise from madness.
So
I would think. So what's your take on that?
No, what I come back to is the position that's being argued in line with the expert consensus? Because if it is, then so as a non-expert in any given area, the expert consensus is the most reliable form of knowledge. Right. Could it be wrong? Sure. However, it's less likely to be wrong than any other form of knowledge. And if it is wrong, one is going to have to be an expert to find what's wrong. But that's all for the experts to sort out. So if someone is representing the expert consensus and in full line with it, one does not need expertise to agree with it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If somebody was my bigger concern, because Nye is not a biologist. When he argues about evolution, what he's saying is in line with what biologists, right? And that is well supported by evidence. Let me take that one step further. The expert consensus is the agreed upon knowledge of those who have the expertise to be able to evaluate the evidence in the field.
Yes.
So none of that requires, like, if I'm going to agree with if 10 electricians tell me that, if 9 electricians tell me that my house was going to burn down if I didn't fix something, but one said that it was just fine, I'd be like, you know what, I actually think I'm going to check that. But it doesn't require expertise in the electrical work in my house to be able to make that conclusion. I'm relying on what the experts have said. Now, I then could go to someone else and say, well, the electricians have all told me this, and this is their reasoning. And again, that's not fallacious. It would be fallacious to say that it is right or wrong because of that, but being in line with it and representing the evidence and what the experts have all agreed to is not fallacious. Mm-hmm. Somebody wants to disagree with an expert consensus, however, that by definition is an extraordinary claim, and it requires an extraordinary amount of evidence. I again don't need expertise necessarily on the on the part of the person making that argument countering the consensus, but they should know they really have their work cut out for them and have evidence to present. And the vast majority of time, what they do is variations of like rhetorical techniques and Gish Gallops and logical fallacy.
Right.
Appealing. Yeah.
Right. I got that on a comment this morning. Actually, they were talking about how it's an atheist miracle for the first stars to have formed. And I said, well, guys, if you took high school level astronomy, you'd know that, we know how stars form in nebulae. It's not super difficult to understand, guys, whatever. And they said, he gave me this big long response, and he cited, some creationist citations, creation ministries. And then I made another claim about, I said, what's something interesting that I found too, just to throw a little tea in there. There is a biblical translator I watch who admittedly is a translator for the Latter-day Saints Church, but his expertise is in translating the Bible from Hebrew. And he was talking about how the first word of the Bible is one of the most, or the first sentence is one of the most misquoted sentences in the whole Bible, very possibly. Because instead of saying in the beginning, it says something more akin to in a beginning when God began to create, which is kind of an incomplete sentence. And so if you translate it more colloquially, his name is Dan McClellan, you'll find him. He says that a lot of people retranslate to in a beginning. But he was arguing that it more correctly translates to when God began to create, because the first word there, Bereshit, means beginning, but the beth is an indefinite. It takes on the definiteness of what comes after. And so what his argument is the definite part of the sentence is when God began to create. So in a beginning, when God began to create, or as God began to create the heavens and the earth was without form and void, which doesn't describe creation from nothing. It describes creation from what's already there. And so I said, what'd you say?
That really is different.
And so I said, so I put that in there in my, in my thing, and I was like, not only is this not an atheist miracle, we don't need a miracle for this, but also the first word of this doesn't even describe out of nothing, and so he gave me his refutation, and I said, well, I'm not a cosmologist, so I'm going to let Yale University take this. And I cited him from Yale University, stars forming, a hypothesis on how the first stars form using computer modeling. And then I cited him the clip of Dan McClellan's explanation of his translation. And he accused me of making appeal to authority fallacy. He's like, all you have are appeals to authority. And I said, quote, all you have are appeals to authority, asterisk, shows only creation scientist citations, because those aren't biased, laugh. And then he accused me of mocking him.
Yeah, I'm actually like, somebody on my Facebook is currently trying to tell me that, well, they were trying to tell me I was wrong when I was explaining what misconceptions about science were.
Mm-hmm.
They clearly didn't know what they were talking about, and so I was trying to engage, and finally I asked something like, I'm just curious, like, what your background in science is, because I'm trying to understand. And to be fair, on a Facebook comment, like, you can't inflect and
Yes.
give and so on. So who knows how that actually came across, but it was like, I'm just trying to understand. I mean, I've been, researching and teaching and communicating about this for over 20 years. And what I'm saying here is in line with what experts science. And it was like the credentials fallacy and like authority. And I'm like, so basically, I mean, I've triggered her. And so she's gotten really defensive about it. But yeah, people pick and choose, right? Like when it's an expert who supports what I think I want to believe, then it's all cool. But when it's not, then I'm going to find it's all some way to discount something that we don't want.
Yeah. I think a fair assessment of that is when that happens, when someone wants to cherry pick some authority as opposed to other, is okay. Can we establish before we move on, are academic papers credible? If I can cite a number of academic papers, is that or is that not credible? Do you accept that as evidence? What is your standard of evidence? Is it reasonable? What is the burden of proof needed for me to meet the standard of evidence that you want? Set that now before you start moving the goalposts on me, or Mott and Baileying up your defenses, because this is nutso.
I think that's absolutely fair. Like starting with, what would change your mind?
Yeah.
Right. And what evidence would you accept?
Yeah.
And
super important.
Like up front. Yeah.
I've said that in posts before. Like if you come to a conversation and the first thing you ask is, okay, well, what would it take to change your mind on this issue? And their answer is nothing. Have that conversation. That conversation isn't for you, and it's not for them. Have that conversation if someone else is watching. Maybe you can educate them, but it's not for them, and it's not for you either. It's not worth engaging, I don't think.
And to be fair, Ken Ham in that argument or in that debate literally said that, like, what would change your mind? And he said nothing.
Right.
So it's a great example of he was being honest, right? He's not going to change his mind. And so that's not a skeptic.
Yeah.
It's a team. And we need to know.
And I always tell, Hunzus has it in Think Keen. It's really awesome. He says how, who would you rather trust? A person who admits when they're wrong and changes, or a person who claims to know everything and never changes their mind? Because another thing that Creation Ministry said to me in that comment is they said if everybody thought like you did and believed everything that they learned in school, 50 years ago or whatever, 100 years ago, they were still teaching that, whites were superior to blacks, racial this, racial superiority this, da-da-da-da-da. And I said the very fact that it said that then and doesn't say that now shows the self-correcting nature of science and education. Science self-corrects in many ways. Does it have problems? Absolutely. Sure. I get it. That's fine. But overall, that's why we appeal to consensus. I'm not committing a bandwagon fallacy when I say the consensus disagrees with you. It is easy for one scientist to be wrong. It's easy for 5 scientists to be wrong. It's very difficult for thousands of them to be wrong. And that's why the consensus matters more than the fringe. The more scientists that I pile up, the less likely it is that they're all wrong. And the only reason you would refute that, and I said this to him, I said the only reason you would refute the consensus is because you need to believe what you believe, and the consensus disagrees. So you must therefore decry the entire system of science and education because it's the only option left to you.
Yeah,
And
this
I
is really,
hope...
these are some basic misconceptions about science. Like, for example, people will, during the pandemic, science, the recommendations were changing. And so to some people, well, scientists are always changing their mind, and that means they don't know anything, or it means they're lying to us, right? And scientific evidence is one thing. What we should do based on that evidence is not science. It should be informed by science, but it's not science itself. And yes, science changes its mind. That is a flipping good thing. The consensus, having people understand what a consensus is, look, I can't help but think that most people just have no idea what scientists do or who they are. Like, I get accused of being a shill all the time.
Me too. A useful idiot, I get called.
Like, I don't make any money off of this, right? I kind of wish I did. Maybe my check's in the mail. But to have this idea that like scientists are out for the money, like I know some really killer scientists. They drive Hondas. They're paying off student loans, right? They live in apartments, right? They are not living high off the hog. And actually, if you think scientists can agree with each other for some sort of ulterior nefarious motive,
You have not met many scientists.
Right, because if they can prove you wrong, they are going to.
Yeah.
And with quite glee, quite frankly, because that's what they're going to do. So, like, if you never, like, scientists love to fight, man. It's one of my ongoing jokes that with whatever their area of specialties, you got to know what kind of bomb you would need to drop for that group of scientists to just start going off on a rant. Defining what a species is. That's one of those things. Like, just drop that, right, and see how the fight goes. And so to think that scientists could actually just conspire with my students, I'll say, okay, let's go back to this. Big Pharma is conspiring to hide a cure for cancer. Would you hide a cure for cancer? And they're like,
no.
How much do you need to be paid to hide a cure for cancer? Right? And they're like, because everybody is touched by cancer. Right? And they inherently know that like that is just not plausible. Someone would talk, right? Someone. Yeah. Anyway.
Agreed. So I think I'm going to wrap up, Melanie. This is awesome. I've loved this conversation. You've been delightful. I hope we can do more. I do want to ask you, of course, do you believe in any biased information? Do you have an unreasonable bias to you that is not necessarily founded for all the critical thinking you espouse?
Well, I do believe the hot dog bun and hot dog manufacturer people are like they're totally doing that.
Absolutely. And putting a little dip in your peanut butter jar so they can sell you less peanut butter. Absolutely happening. Debate me,
Absolutely.
Bro.
Oh, and peanut butter ice cream is the best flavor of ice cream. I don't know why they keep that. Like, someone has to be hiding that somewhere. You
keep that subjective opinion to yourself. Cookies and cream.
Oh, my opinion is objectively true.
Beaten down by the expert. I have no authorities to appeal to.
I suppose one of the funniest things that I will cop to is that I've heard that scientific studies confirm that people who curse are smarter than others, and I just think that's amazing.
It surely is.
It is the truth.
God everybody, this is Melanie Trecek-King. She's awesome. She's been kicking butt with us. Holy, it was wonderful. If you caught this in one part, if you caught it in multiple parts, that's awesome. If you caught it over here at Gaming with Everyone, if you caught it over on Melanie's channel, that's awesome. Please show all the love and all the support and all the hype, because it's important that we inoculate against misinformation, right? I'm a gaming channel, and it matters to me. It can matter to you. And I used to be in it. I used to be down inside the depths of pseudoscience. Melanie used to be too. We can come through. You can come through. You can do it. It's okay. It's okay, because you don't have to believe wrong things to be special. You're already special, and people love you. The world is not out to get you. You're going to be just fine. Focus on the people who love and care about you. And our motto here, Melanie, because you don't know it, okay, is this: don't hate, don't discriminate, love forever, and play together. Good night, everybody.
That's brilliant. Good night. Yes. I'm so sorry my computer's going to die.
Oh, no. Go get your charger. Plug it in. You're fine.
Sorry about that.
No, no sorries. You never have to be sorry here. This is a sorry-free space.
Sorry-free?
Sorry-free. No sorries. We are totally understanding. Everything is fine.
Okay. We're good now.
That's how I did. It's what I do to all my students, too. All of my one-on-one side tutor, they're like, oh, sorry, I have to da-da-da. And I'm like, sorry-free space. You never have to be sorry here. No one ever does. I don't. It's not necessary. Did you punch me in the face? No, we're fine. Okay. Did you cause me? Wound me. My lady, you wound me. No. That's a good outtake. I like that outtake. That at the end.